Dark Souls is a critique of capitalism. I mean it. Dark Souls, the games franchise owned by From Software, developed by Hidetaka Miyazaki, is a criticism of capitalism and the hegemony of liberalism. In this video, I'm going to convince you all that Gwyn is indeed an oppressive tyrant, a dictator, and the Age of Fire is synonymous with capitalism, while the elements of Dark, the Hollows, and humans are synonymous with the workers of the world held down by the ideological apparatuses created by Gwyn, convincing us, the humans, to preserve the very institution that exploits our existence. Whoa, now that's quite a thesis, but stick with me because I'm finally going to use my master's degree in politics and philosophy to good-ish use. Less contemporary modes of art have famously retained conscious and subconscious morals projected by their directors and creators. Dark Souls isn't an exception to this rule. Listen, I'm not saying that Dark Souls is some kind of realist painting, but gaming, just like any other mode of art, has real-world projection sewn deeply into its fabric. This is especially the case for games like Dark Souls. You only have to play Dark Souls for a few minutes before being bombarded by themes of class struggle, revolution, oppression, and the rise and fall of empires. The first bloody cutscene details Gwyn emerging from the underbelly of the world to topple the prevailing order of everlasting dragons, bringing an end to an era and ushering in a new one of his own, one that is fairer to his people. To understand the importance of Gwyn's revolution, we really have to first understand what the Age of the Everlasting Dragons was. For that, we have to look at the real-world concept of the state of nature. Through Enlightenment, philosophers have spoken of a concept known as the state of nature. Jean-Jacques Rousseau hypothesized what the beginning of human social interaction was before the advent of organized production. Rousseau argued primitive human societies were marked with peace. Humans lived in relative equality due to the absence of the conditions of hierarchy. We were, in his words, noble savages. When human society became more proficient and created tools and other agricultural technologies, this created more resources than we needed just for survival. And this surplus of resources was the material condition for conflict between humans. History from the advent of productive forces is marked by cyclical class conflict. The ruling class that controlled the means of production and the working class that found themselves dependent on the productive powers of the ruling class, open to have the only aspect of their being that has value exploited: their labour. German philosopher Hegel, and later the father of socialism Marx, adopted this theory of dialectics in understanding how societies evolved in a cyclical manner. The ruling order, or as Marx would put it, the thesis such as corporate monopolies of capitalism, would come into adversity with an antithesis, such as the labourers of capitalism. This conflict will eventually synthesize into a new society, only to be burdened again with the antithetical forces that perpetuated that very same cycle. This is the dialectic within the narrative of social progress. It's understood that one class would systematically dominate the other for their own benefit until society cycles to a point of either utter annihilation or a pinnacle of societal advancements that would make us all equal again. What does this have to do with Dark Souls? Well, from the very beginning of the series, we are introduced to the world of Dark Souls with a grand opening cutscene. The intro cutscene details the canonical origins of the franchise, and it goes like this. History as we know it begins at the First Age, the Age of Ancients, a barren wasteland of grey arc trees with its sole inhabitants being the everlasting dragons and the hollows that lay beneath the land. The concept of this existence was made to infer the absence of death, conflict, and the conditions for material inequality. However, much like in Rousseau's understanding of primal society as one that existed absent of war, oppression, and hierarchy, something would come and change that, beginning the dialectical nature that would define the cycles of hitherto society. For Rousseau, human civilizations became contentious because of tools and weapons. However, in Dark Souls, that very sentiment is in the form of fire. Fire in Dark Souls is a spontaneous revelation that brought about the downfall of the Age of Ancients. Much like Rousseau's Primal Society, the Age of Ancients was the first era of society, and much like Primal Society, the emergence of productive tools would be synonymous with the existence of fire and the Lord Souls. The representatives of this new class of people were inspired by the fire and branded with these Lord Souls. Equipped with these Lord Souls, they would change society, overturning the Age of Ancients and ushering in the Age of Fire. Just like in Marx's dialectics, this new age was riddled with hierarchy and conflict. As where fire existed, so did dark. And these two classes of people would be bound to compete throughout history. Throughout the duration of the game, we are told the Hollows are a force of evil. Gwyn and his followers do their best to portray the narrative that the elements of the dark, such as the hollowing and the spread of the abyss, are against the interests of society as we know it. Figures such as Artorias, who fought so vigilantly against the abyss, would be revered as noble protectors against the scourge of darkness. By the same extension, from the very beginning of the game, we are constantly told the Hollows are a scourge and a representation of the dark, henceforth synonymous with evil. Most vanilla playthroughs of the game do not challenge the morality of Gwyn, asserting his concept of good as universal truth. It is good to rekindle the flame, and it's good to preserve the Age of Fire, even if it costs us our own life. This whole moral structure, however, can be challenged if you use Marx's theory of dialectics. Humans are the oppressed class in this Age of Fire, we can presume. As the protagonist of Dark Souls, we are human. Throughout the series, we are seldom told the nature of humanity, away from the fact that we are destined to become vessels of evil if we are not to fulfill the rekindling of fire. In the final installment of Dark Souls, from a variety of item descriptions and environmental details, we learn humans are a class of beings created from the dark and therefore natural inhabitants of the abyss. Human knights, to be later acknowledged as ring knights, aided Gwyn in ending the Age of Ancients and ushering in his Age of Fire. The architects of this new age, such as Gwyn, however, rightfully saw the dialectical relationship between fire and dark. They knew the threat the darkness posed. They knew the threat humans posed to their new Age of Fire. Even if the humans helped bring the Age of Fire into existence, they also held the power to overthrow it. This frightened Gwyn. I'm going to let Karth summarize this perfectly for us.
Your ancestor claimed the Dark Souls and waited for fire to subside, and soon the flames did fade, and only dark remained. Thus began the Age of Men, the Age of Dark. However, Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his Age of Fire and in dire fear of humans, and the Dark Lord who would one day be born amongst them. Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire and commanding his children to shepherd the humans. Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord.
Gwyn, much like the ruling elite of human society, saw the revolutionary underclass as the sole threat to its existence. Therefore, allowing the underclass to grow in strength would limit its very existence. To thwart this impending revolution, he cast himself into the fire, creating the conditions of perpetual class conflict, as he had disrupted the natural progression of the ages. This would create the class dialectic of society, putting the rulers of fire and the underclass of dark indefinitely in cyclical conflict. In order to fight this class conflict, Gwyn set about a campaign to cloud the class consciousness of humanity in order to subdue them. This would be realized when Gwyn brandished all hollows with a dark sign. The Ring City reveals to us that the dark sign existed to confine humanity rather than preserve it, as we are originally led to believe. The best part is the evidence of this has been in front of us the entire series. Just take a look at the dark sign. I mean, like, properly look at it. It's a circular ring of fire isolating a dark center. A wall of fire to hold back the darkness that is our birthright. We can draw parallels between the ruling class of our society to the ruling class of Dark Souls. Through history, be it a feudal king or corporate CEO of capitalism, the ruling class has used ideological apparatuses such as media, art and culture to blur any ideas that they are the cause of oppressive conditions. In Dark Souls, Gwyn uses similar modes of illusion and deception to subdue the discontent amongst his subjects. One stark example of this is Gwyndolin's illusion of the sun over Anolondo. In order to maintain the illusion of the Age of Fire, Gwyn's descendants created the illusion of the sun over the city, where in reality that very city had been completely encapsulated in darkness. However, this class dialectic is not only found here. A dark underclass and a ruling class of fire being in contention is found throughout the game, from covenants such as the Dark Wraiths against the Blue Sentinels and the existence of two world serpents, Karth and Frampt. Frampt existed to preserve the Age of Fire and Karth existed to empower the revolutionary changes of the Dark. It's no coincidence that finding Karth or even the secrets of Anolondo is made purposefully difficult, because Gwyn's ideological influence is systemic and intense. Using a critical lens, we can understand humans, the undead, the abyss, and all elements of dark are, in fact, the oppressed class, and the agents of fire are systemically oppressing them due to man's revolutionary nature. This sets the tone for the entire franchise, a battle of the proletarian hollows against the bourgeois lords.